love Worldless. I love everything about it. It combined two of my favorite games ever and then made turn-based combat that is actually fun, with so many abilities, even an entire second character. But that second character felt underused. I like him a lot, but in combat I found myself staying as Blue Girl instead of Red Guy. And this challenge aims to fix that by beating all the combats with only Red Guy. In this chapter, I'm going to explain the important mechanics and why this challenge is hard. If you're already familiar with the game, skip ahead to the next chapter. This is a turn-based combat system, where on your turn it turns into a fighting game where you try to tie together combos to fill the absorption meter to the bar, where we can press the right buttons in the right order to absorb them within the given time limit. But just filling to the bar only tells you about some of the buttons. Then you have to guess the rest, but filling it all the way up means you instantly absorb them. Most attacks are very similar between Red Guy and Blue Girl, except for what kind of attack they are, because of these guys. While they exist, the enemies take half the damage they would, and the blocks must be hit by a certain attack to be removed, and Red doesn't have all of those kinds of attacks. But there is an attack we can use once per turn that allows Blue Girl to do one attack, so we can slowly break down the blocks turn by turn. The defending turn is where the characters are really different. Blue Girl has two different blocks. One for magic attacks, which are the vertical lines, and one for physical attacks, which are the horizontal lines. But she only has 5 of each block, unless you perfect parry, before she has to not block for a turn to regenerate the blocks. That's where Red Guy comes in. He has infinite of his blocks, but they are far weaker. His first block is him disappearing for half a second, allowing him to dodge attacks, but that doesn't work when it's multiple attacks in a row. So then you have to use his arm block, which halves all damage taken unless you release the block immediately after blocking, which will deal a bit of damage to the enemy and heal a bit of the taken damage. And finally, we have techniques, which is when your hand glows, giving you new abilities. It glows blue after blocking 5 attacks and glows orange after landing 5 punches. The blue technique allows us to consume a magical attack to heal us, and the orange technique allows us to use several different very powerful attacks. Our main one is these shooty boys, because they fill up the bar a lot. And that's all the info you need right now, so it's time to start the challenge. There are 2 different types of enemies in this game. There are red ones and blue ones, just like we have a red character and a blue character. Their main difference is that the red ones have a health bar that if it depletes, they die without us being able to absorb them. And our main goal is to absorb them, not kill them. So they're gonna be a bit hard because of that, but not for the first few guys. They're so easy, like we just destroy them. And then there's Spine. There's so much about this guy I hate. First of all, he has 2 blocks, and most of the time, one of them is for Blue Girl, so it takes 4 turns to get rid of his block. Third of all, his glowing spine means if you hit him twice, he can hit you right back, which makes it really hard to punch him, which makes it tough to actually get our shooty boys deployed to deal the most damage that we want to. And one more thing, he has kind of pathetic health, so it's hard to absorb him without committing murder, especially with us having to spend 4 turns to get rid of his block. So our strategy is to use a magic attack on him, because that gets rid of his glowing spine, and then we can punch him to charge our technique and activate shooty shooty. And our blocking strategy is to use the arm block for most attacks except for this one. And if our hand glows, we absorb some magic attacks to heal ourselves up. And eventually, just doing this, we're able to beat him. He wasn't too big of a roadblock, but he's just a warning for what's to come. Lanky and cubes are a cakewalk, but then we get the run killer, legs. They are literally impossible as red guy, because they disappear if you don't perfect parry all of their attacks, and I'm afraid red guy cannot perfect parry. But who cares, the challenge continues with bulky. This is one of the few combats where we use the punch technique instead of shooty shooty technique, because we want to lower the health bar of this guy, because once it's gone, then we can actually do absorption damage to absorb them easily. And Volcano is basically a harder version of him. It's a longer fight and way harder to dodge the attacks, and his health matters a bit more, so both of our healths are quickly depleting, but eventually I get really lucky and eat him up. Phoenix seems like they'd be a problem at first, but I found out using fire attacks on them heals their health, so we don't gotta worry about killing them, which makes them pretty easy. We've got one last red combat to take care of. Most players' worst nightmare. The Pit Fiend. Most of the blue combats are so easy they don't even deserve a mini montage, except for two of them being impossible. The first worthy opponent is the Lionel. Our attacking turn stays as its usual of punching and shooting, except we do use the right attacks to destroy enemy blocks if they decide to block, because if we don't, lots of bad things happen. Our guarding turn is where things get tough, because the Lionel just has so many attacks. For basically all physical attacks, we use the arm block, because there's always multiple in a row with her. And then if she leads with magic attacks, absorb it or disappear from it.
and immediately use the arm block for the physical attack that comes right after. And the hardest attack to deal with is when she summons snowflakes, which allow the Lionel to do her strongest attack after shooting 2 magic bullets that we arm block. And then the Lionel comes in with an ultra attack that we disappear to dodge. But if you finally dodge everything perfectly, you'll have enough health and absorption damage to get rid of her. And then we fight the Aasimar, which seems like they'd be hard. They're meant to be the big bad final blue combat, but they are honestly a punching bag. Until Phase 2. Now they resist every bit of damage, making the fight take forever, and they start dealing out way more damage, making this a lot more painful. So we just have to arm block for everything unless we have a blocking technique ready to absorb some magic, and we want to disappear dodge the giant lightning strike and the super spear throw. It was the longest fight yet, but there's also not much to talk about. And that wraps up all the blue. Oh yeah, there's one more blue combat. The one I've been dreading. The lightning guy. So you know the blocking technique that lets us absorb magic attacks to heal, and is one of the only reasons some of these combats weren't torture. Well, this guy doesn't have magic attacks. They're all physical attacks. So now we have to disappear dodge every attack. Oh wait, he does multiple attacks in a row after his first big attack, which means we can only dodge the first thing and have to take more damage afterwards. And all that would be okay, maybe even just a little bit harder than the Aasimar, if he didn't have a second phase where he stops taking damage from shooty and all other magic attacks, and does even more attacks on his turn. He's so hard I had to go back to the skill tree to see if there were any abilities I forgot about. And there were. If we let go of the arm block immediately after blocking, we deal a bit of absorption damage and heal a bit of health. So now we have to have perfect timing for pretty much every single attack he does. And even that can't save us, because Phase 2 still absolutely murders us. So we need some way to make sure Phase 2 doesn't stay around for long. And surprisingly, that's something we can do. His Phase 2 works a little bit differently than the other bosses, because Phase 2 doesn't happen once you fill up the absorption meter once. It happens halfway through his absorption meter, right around here. So if we spend one turn filling his absorption to right below there, then we get an entire turn to send him as far through Phase 2 as we want. But even that's not enough. He still completely obliterated me, so I had to go 100% the game to get more health and turn time to deal more damage. And even after all that, we haven't even talked about our attacking turn, which stays pretty normal in Phase 1, aside from making sure not to push his health too far until the right time. But in Phase 2, it's torture. First of all, I have to make sure not to shooty and instead punchy. And he also has this thing, which means we have to be careful not to send him into the air. And sometimes he makes something that means we have to use a magic attack before we can get to him, making everything just take way longer. So all that combines means if we want to beat him, we have to be perfect and lucky. 6 more bosses. All we need to do is defeat 6 more bosses and we're done. Starting with the easiest one, which is this secret boss that's like, it's so pathetically easy, it's barely worth mentioning.
Boss number 5 is Shapes, which seems to be missing something. But all we gotta do is break the blocks and then we can actually do some absorption damage. So it's overall an easy boss, at least compared to the last couple. Boss number 4 is Dual Color, probably my favorite combat in the game. But not because it's hard, it's a fairly easy boss, so there's not much to talk about. But it's also a really fun boss. Boss number 3 is where things get tough. Phase 1 is fairly simple with some easy attacks to dodge and the usual attacking strategy, aside from using some magic attacks to break some of the weird blocks. But Phase 2 is rough. He starts bombarding us with attacks, making our health decrease very quickly. But the worst part is that he becomes immune to a new attack every turn, until his super attack, which means we can't break the blocks, making the fight really long, giving him more chances to murder the heck out of me. But other than that, there's not much new about this guy, so we managed to beat him. Boss number 2 is another impossible combat. It wants us to destroy every kind of block in one turn, and since we can only get one blue attack a turn, it's completely impossible. One boss left, the final combat, and by far the hardest. Big Green. The immediately noticeable thing that makes this painful is look at all those blocks. And they also randomize every turn, meaning we have to cycle through a bunch of abilities to figure out what each block is. Except there's an ability I forgot about for far too long, but I finally remembered it. It does damage to every kind of block immediately except for red and blue physical attacks, and also increases absorption damage dealt by 50%. Meaning the blocks aren't as big as a problem as I thought. Second big problem is how little damage we do. It's honestly pathetic, meaning it's gonna be real tough to beat him before he beats us. And of course, he has more phases. The second phase happens a couple turns after you break all of the blocks, and he makes you fight whatever character you're using. I feel like the less cheaty option here is to make him take Blue Girl by switching to Blue Girl for a couple seconds, because actually fighting Red Guy as Blue Girl, like, that beats the whole point of the challenge. And the strategy for fighting Blue Girl is to hope they use a magic attack and save a blue technique to quickly beat them. If we don't get a magic attack, we reset the attempt. And then there's Phase 3, which is when you break his blocks again. And this is just Phase 1 amped up to 11. Making our health a ticking time bomb that could explode at any moment if we make a single mistake or get an unlucky attack. Then the worst thing about this phase happens. He charges the ultimate attack. This attack reduces us to exactly 1 health, and the only way to avoid it is to kill him fast enough that this doesn't happen, which I'm afraid is completely impossible, because of how slow only Red Guy makes us go. And 1 health isn't enough to dodge any attacks, because disappearing is inconsistent, and arm blocking only takes away half damage. So effectively, every single attempt ends right here. Hey, you may have noticed that I haven't posted in 5 months, and this video is just about to fix that. So I've been working on a really big video, beating Tears of the Kingdom with only 1 item slot, and it's been taking forever. The video is fully recorded, except for the final boss marathon, and 30 minutes of it is edited, which is probably around half of the video. So I was meant to be probably putting my effort into working on that one, but it really didn't feel right to not have posted in so long. And this game just came out, and I got a good idea for a challenge. So I decided to make this video first to, just give you something while I'm finishing up the other video. It should be out soon, and by soon I mean hopefully under a month. Except Penny's Big Breakaway also came out, and I want to do a challenge on that one. And Splatoon 3 Side Order just came out, and I also want to do a challenge on that one. So, come to think of it, you'll see that video in a couple years.